the Biden administration encourages illegal migrants to come in, will not deport illegal immigrants, even those who break laws in this country after they get in. Interior enforcement has collapsed. They're flying illegals at taxpayer expense after providing food, medical care, shelter, everything else for the processing, flying them to places as far as New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, you name it. Los Angeles is not very far from the border. And now they're putting them up in luxury hotels. The border. I got to say, I was expecting there to be some effort by the Bidens. I always like to say where I'm right and where I'm wrong. We raise the alarm here a lot about the border, Clay. It is, and I speak to people at Border Patrol, really I'd say every couple of weeks. I've got a few contacts down there. I'll check in, I'll call them, or I'll do a separate interview with them just to get the latest. The border right now, the U.S.-Mexico border, is the worst it has ever been. And for people who live in Minneapolis or New York or far away, or I guess close to the northern border, but not the same issue, far away from our southern border, they know that the Biden administration is using taxpayer dollars to send illegal migrants on flights. By the way, what's the paperwork they need for these flights? I'm getting my iris scanned. I'm going through TSA. I'm like, if you're illegal.
It's actually a really good question. Like, how do they just randomly put a bunch of illegal immigrants on an airplane flight?
I think they just put them on because, the different set of rules for the illegals, as in they can break even more laws. So they're distributed. Every state is a border state is the phrase you hear, and that's true. I had thought at this point the Biden administration would make some effort somehow to make it seem like they don't want this illegal migration. That usually the game the Democrats play, stretching back to the Obama administration, there was a time when even the media criticism of Obama was he was the deporter in chief. Do you remember that? It was a short while, but there were deportations going on under the Obama administrations. Deportations have collapsed under the Biden administration. Just so you all know, the deportations are way down. Interior enforcement has effectively ceased. Unless you're a serious violent felon that's causing some political problem for Democrats if it gets into the newspapers. And even then, sometimes they let people stay. So interior enforcement has plummeted. The Remain in Mexico policy has just been ended. Unceremoniously ended by the Biden administration. Yeah, we're just not doing that anymore. So they won't change the incentive structure that brings all these illegal migrants into the country, illegal immigrants into the country. And now, Clay, we've got these numbers of 1.82 million arrests at the southern border in the government fiscal year, which means October through the end of September. It looks like they're going to hit 2 million arrests. A huge percentage of those 2 million are released into the country, never to be seen by the authorities in any immigration proceeding again. No one really knows the exact number. I would wager it's something along the order of 60 or 70% at least. And that doesn't even include the gotaways, which is a number that Border Patrol contacts have told me is officially, I think, 500,000. They think that's closer to 800,000 or 900,000 right now, getting close. So you may have 2 million arrests resulting in maybe 1.2, 1.4 million, something like that, let into the country, and 1 million gotaways who are straight up in the country. This is the largest illegal migration the country has ever seen.
Yeah, look, Griff Jenkins at Fox News just reported this morning, Buck, that migrant encounters have officially surpassed 2 million. And to put that into context, last year's record-setting numbers at this point in time were 1.277 million. So these are numbers we truly have never seen before in the history of the country. And Joe Biden has still never made a trip to the border in his entire time in office so far. And think about all the places. You made a point back when the Ukraine invasion started. Joe Biden, it is fair to say, has been far more concerned about border security in Ukraine than he has border security in the United States. And you asked the question, they put these illegal immigrants on airplane flights. Remember, even though it's stupid, we still have a policy that you can't come into this country on a flight unless you have gotten the COVID shot. That hasn't gone away yet. But if you walk across the southern border, you are allowed to enter, and they won't even test you for COVID. So if you have a family member who is living overseas and is trying to come visit you here, they have to have received the COVID shot to come in. If they want to come walk across the southern border, no restrictions at all, and the American government will put them on an airplane flight and put them somewhere else. And this ties in what we were just saying in the last segment. The only way that any attention has been given to this issue at all, Buck, is because Greg Abbott made the decision to start busing some of these illegal immigrants up to New York and D.C. and drop them off there. That's the only coverage that most of the mainstream media has given, and it's only been because Muriel Bowser and Eric Adams have mishandled this to such an extent that they're complaining about all of the influx of illegal immigration, which is a pinprick of what's happening in Texas.
I could go take about a 3-minute stroll and go check in with some of the illegal migrants who are now being housed at taxpayer expense in a number of Times Square area luxury hotels in New York City. So this is now the country we're in. The Biden administration, so everyone understands this, and as folks are still trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bills, what the economy is going to look like for them in 3 months and 6 months. There's a lot of people pulling back on their spend. People are running up credit card debt. You know, this is an uncertain time for a lot of folks financially, and I mean tens of millions across the country. The Biden administration encourages illegal migrants to come in, will not deport illegal immigrants, even those who break laws in this country after they get in. Interior enforcement has collapsed. They're flying illegals at taxpayer expense after providing food, medical care, shelter, everything else for the processing, flying them to places as far as New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, you name it. Los Angeles is not very far from the border. And now they're putting them up in luxury hotels, which would cost, if you and your family listening to this go to some of these hotels, you're going to spend $300 a night, everybody. If you're an illegal, the city of New York is now putting you up in Times Square for free. And then you're going to get free health care. And then you're going to get free legal advice to beat the immigration system. By the way, it's not free. It's all from the taxpayer.
Yeah, no, 100%. But if you were hearing all this on text messages, if you were hearing all this on WhatsApp, do you blame anybody for deciding to come here? I mean, this is the incentive structure that we have created. If you have an awful life in Latin America and you suddenly hear that you can get on an airplane flight to New York City and stay in a Times Square hotel, I mean, that sounds amazing, right? It's not a surprise. And this is why so many of the people walking across the border are specifically citing Joe Biden's election as the impetus behind their entire trip. And yet, other than those buses that Greg Abbott has sent to the East Coast, almost zero coverage of over 2 million encounters now at the border.
But you'll notice Democrats want this, they like this, they perpetuate this, and also it's directly tied into the overwhelming of Border Patrol. Is directly tied into the unprecedented amounts of fentanyl just flooding into the country, over 100,000 fatal overdoses last year. And that's in every community. I mean, that's our people listening in Kentucky, in Georgia, in Ohio. They know that's everywhere. The fentanyl is washing around the country. It's killing people all over the place. This is all tied together. And the Biden administration acts like they're not in favor of this. It's dishonest. They are not in favor of the drug overdose, but they're in favor of the wide open border. And they refuse to do anything about it. And Clay, if they had the courage of their convictions, they should just say we should have open borders. They should just say we're going to change the law. If you come here, you get to stay. Because that's basically what we have. At least if you come from a non-English speaking developing world country and walk across the border, you get to come here and stay. So we'll continue to follow up on this, folks, because the American people are not with the Biden administration on this. And it's a top issue for a lot of independents, not just Republicans, the wide open border. We're going to continue to hammer that